First thing we're going to do is go through why do we do this, like why do we do the DarkNet in general, which is not just a badge but a whole contest. But before I get started, I actually want, the guy sitting up here in the front is the reason for our badge this year, and pretty much almost all the badges before that. So he's the one that does all the hardware design. He's the one that gives me headaches at the night because I'm the one that writes all the software. So he does the hardware and then hands it to me and goes, please make it all work. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Zero and Gatorbyte, I'm going to turn it over to Zero to talk about kind of who we are and what we do.
Cool. So my interest in this talk actually was that I also want to learn how to build badges. I'm part of this organization, been with the DarkNet for a few years, and I've always wanted to jump in. And actually, I never knew where to start. What do I do? How do I put hardware together? How do I get a bomb together? What's a bomb? And so I was interested in this talk, and I'm glad I'm here so I can hear how to do that. But let me tell you a little bit about the DarkNet first. The DarkNet, as you may know, is a contest that we run at DefCon. It's a game. It's sort of like an MMO. We're driven by a chatbot that presents questions and challenges to our agents, who are our players, and they answer the questions and interact with the chatbot, and they get points as they go along. Now, the overall story that goes behind the Demon comes from a pair of books by Daniel Suarez called Demon and Freedom, and actually Change Agent is his newest book. And so our game has an in-game storyline that follows our agents and our operatives, who are the people who put on the game every year, through this game, through this challenge, and we award points and get people to the end. And one of the primary goals that we have is in introducing everybody to DefCon, to introducing them to hacking, to Wi-Fi cracking, to lockpicking. And so we try to be an introduction and a learning game and an educational experience, as well as a community. Besides being an event, we're also an organization that runs all year round. We're an LLC that supports this game, and we support this game with many, many volunteers. We're all doing this just because we love it, and we support ourselves actually by making money by selling these badges, which support us to make more badges the next year, and not like that. And so we focus on many different aspects. We focus on publicity, we focus on the technical aspect of what we do, we focus on having user relations and getting new people in our organization to help us build bigger and bigger games every year. And building and growing is something that we're very familiar with now. So when I first started working with the DarkNet about 4 years ago, we were 4, 5, maybe 6 people working on it, and we had a total badge count of something like 300. 4 years later, we're looking at almost 4 times that many both volunteers with the organization and badges that we're going to be moving through both for our players and for people who are just curious to get these badges. So I'm going to hand it over to Gator to talk a little bit more about our community.
So basically, okay. So we're building a community that's self-motivated individuals to actually get in and work with each other, which is the exciting part about this. And we're here to learn, teach, and play in the technological realm. We're not claiming to be experts. We're trying to get away from the elitist attitude, and we're actually trying to be able to open up our arms and the opportunity for more people to come into the field. So again, we're supposed to be going back and forth with each other in the community. So we've actually created subcommittees called Holons. And the idea behind a Holon is that it is citing both whole and apart. So you're able to go through and say the same thing that we see in one individual inside of a Holon is the same idea as the Holon, to where we're supposed to continue to feed back into the community and create a positive environment. So with our community, anybody can volunteer to get into it. That's the awesome part. There's a lot to do. You have to be able to teach something. And we're not asking for just teachers. We're saying, are you willing to be able to give back? So this, as part of our onboarding process, you have to teach us something. And it could be, well, we'll get into that. Whatever you'd like to do, we have places that need to be filled. And there are more things that we could be doing with your help. So we usually have you come in, check out a couple meetings, see what areas that you guys like, and then teach us something, even if it's underwater basket weaving. It's all about sharing our knowledge. So we're not siloing any information. We want to share as much as we possibly can. So the cool part is our agents are actually starting to step up in this case. They're giving back to the community. Past winners are helping out with current people to be able to push their knowledge forward. And then even other people are going through and arranging parties now. Parties, anyone? Helping other players when they get stuck inside of the Discord channel, and creating communities that encouraging, again, each other and giving back. So I'm going to hand it to Manco.
All right, so now we'll actually talk about badges and that sort of thing. One thing I do want to make clear, we are an LLC, but that is only because the federal government got a little upset with us after we deposited money from the badge sales. So we actually, we operate as a nonprofit, and we are still in the process of getting our nonprofit, but we did have to register as an LLC because the government got a little grumpy about putting all the badge sales into one person's account and the money dispersed the next day. For some reason they thought that was upsetting to them. Next slide. So we'll start from the badges. Actually, year 1 and year 2, I actually wasn't a part of it. I think even year 1, you weren't a part of it. You started on year 2, right? Right. So year 1 was Smitty, and year 2 was this guy. I don't even know. Did Smitty run the firmware for that year? Cool. All right, and then so when we started, this was like 10, I think. And I think that one was 100. And then second year, or third year, we moved on to this one, which we had 300. Smitty wrote most of the firmware for that one. And I took over the firmware the following year, and we actually added a display board. Every year we added more functionality. The things that we learned was you can only fit so much in 2K of memory. So by the third year of trying to get even at 1 bit per pixel and 64 or 128 by 64 display, that's 1K of memory. So out of 2K of memory, things were getting a little tight. So the fourth year, we moved on to an STM32. STM32 had 12K of RAM and was 48 megahertz. So we didn't have problems with the display anymore, so we got even more aggressive and added a 915 transceiver, 915 megahertz transceiver, display, the touch buttons, a whole bunch of more LEDs, and this time we ran out of pins because we only had 48 of those. And the QWERTY keyboard plus the SPI for the radios ate up all our pins. So when we get to the 6th year, we learned a whole bunch of things last year. Last year, we learned that having 216 solder points for relatively new solderers was long, and we had the hardware hacking village yell at us many, many times, so that's a good learning lesson. Not so many. The other thing we learned is small SMD parts is hard for people that have never soldered before. So we had like at one point we actually ran out of extra resistors because people were dropping them and then couldn't find them on the floor. Weird. So one of the things we went into this year with is how do we reduce solder points? How do we use bigger parts? But we wanted to hit the balance between how do we make it easy for the newbie, but also a little bit of challenge for somebody that's actually soldered before, so it isn't done in 5 minutes. It doesn't feel like you actually learned anything. So hopefully we hit a good medium. One of the things that we did do is we moved the capacitance buttons, so that whole keyboard went away, so we didn't have all those solder points anymore. We also, I think everybody realized last year, we actually bought the dev boards, and then you slid the dev board into our board. This year, we actually Crux laid out the MCU and all the passives and everything for that MCU directly on our board, and then we got them pick and placed. So the takeaway for us is we moved from a STM F103 to a SMT32 302. This also moved us from 48 pins to 64 pins. So we actually have a few left over, and there are a few surprises pulled out to the board. Every free pin is pulled out on the board this year, so that you can do something with it. Next slide. We also went to 30K of RAM too, and 128K of flash, and I still can't fit all the code on the flash. And I have packed it in about as tight as I can do it, and there just isn't enough room. That speaks more to the amount of functionality we have on the board and less to do with how horrible my software engineering skills are. So this year's badge. Could have waited a second for me to build up to a gator. So, cool design, huh? Crux, good job, huh? So we keep advancing the badge, but keep going back in time. So we had the T9 keyboard before, and we're like, what could we do even before a T9 keyboard? Well, we could do the old rotary phone thing. So it still uses an IR transceiver, and it's actually compatible with year 5. That does not mean the firmware can be uploaded because it is a different MCU, but it does mean that you can pair with badges from last year, and you can still send the 915 megahertz transceiver text messaging like we did last year as well. It does have a full color LCD screen on 30K of RAM. If you calculate 1 byte per pixel on 128 by 160, you don't have a lot of RAM left at the end. Another lesson learned, especially when someone wants to write a 3D renderer with a Z buffer. So the Z buffer has an entire 4 bits of Z buffer and a whole 6 bits of color while it's running in 3D mode. So we did pull out pins for the audio, but that code is commented out currently because if I uncomment it, I don't have enough space. There is a USB port on it for both charging for the LiPo battery, and there was also going to be for serial communication, but that is also commented out because we ran out of memory. And then, as we said before, it's powered by the STM32.302. Many people, when they hear the STM, they think of the F4s and go, oh, that's why you could do the 3D rendering. No, the F4s have a lot more RAM than the F3s do. And there's a few more things that I'll save because that would give other surprises away. So I'm going to turn it over to Gator to kind of go through how we go about setting up this development environment, because the other thing that we learned through doing this is last year we had a good number of people try to set up our development environment and struggled a bit. So this year we're actually putting step by step instructions on how to do it. We've also had a number of people within the team now set it up and get it working. Go ahead, Gator.
So basically our idea with this is that we wanted to make sure that we had a platform that anybody could get up and started. So we started something with very basic. We just went with Ubuntu and 1604, so it's stable long-term edition. And lessons learned, don't try to do it on a machine less than 4 gigabytes. If you want to talk about it, get me a beer. Afterwards, going through and saying, setting up the development environment, there's only a handful of tools that you need, but they need to be installed in order. So these are a couple of them. The ARM toolchain, yeah, you need Java. It sucks, but that's okay. It's cross-platform. So we can go through and grab our ARM embedded toolchain. You go through and grab the Eclipse. Long story short, instead of boring you with 97 pages of how-to videos, check out the site. We're going to be posting that after this week, so then you can set this up and start playing with it. So you can follow us on Discord, get us at Twitter, or follow us on Reddit as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it back off to Command Code.
So a good number of questions I get is, so when I start developing a board, what should we be communicating over? Like if I have a peripheral, should I be using I2C? Should I use SPI? Should I just use digital? Should I use PWM? Pretty much it depends on the actual device. I will say that programming-wise, I2C is a dream to program with. SPI is a bitch. It's my personal opinion. I have a lot of problems with SPI usually, but we have at least 3 components on the badge this year to talk SPI. So it does, obviously it works, but there are the handling of chip select. So essentially you have the master in, slave out, master out, slave in, and then the 2 power pins. And then you also have a chip select pin. So if you set them up in serial, you have to have a different chip select pin for each one, and you pull it low to let each one know which one you're talking to. So if it's the second one in the chain, you pull that one low. The first one knows to ignore the message and pass it on to the second one, essentially. Whereas I2C, you just give it an address. You talk over 2 wires, done. So the same wire you send over, the same wire you receive over. The display this year is actually a SPI half. So it's half duplex. So there's a master in or a master out, slave in, but that's also used for the master in, slave out. So there's a whole bunch of timing issues about sending it and then waiting long enough before you switch back to listen from, if you want to like pull the version off the display or things like that. There's very few commands that you can actually run against the display, but those get, there's timing issues in there that I found that even as I was moving between badges, of our own badges, that timing wasn't working between one or the next one. And then digital, so we use digital for our LEDs this year. You could use PWM too and get different levels of brightness, but we didn't have enough hardware PWMs to do that with this year, so, and I ran out of space to write it all in software. Next slide. Okay, so a little bit of a journey of building badges as we started from 300, if I'll start from the 300 years, you know, getting all those things built, fronting all the money up front, because this year we fronted about 33,000 up front between a small number of us to get these badges built. Parts were going to Crux's house, my place, Zero's house, and then somehow miraculously on Monday they all ended up at the Sin shop here, and some very awesome people that I see sitting in our third row helped us put it together and literally spent like 9 hours at the Sin shop with us, bagging all the badges up. It was truly a group effort, and it was really nice to see. A couple of things. Once you've picked your badge and you've set up the boards, we use Eagle to do board layouts. All that's done. You've sent off your badge. You get it manufactured. You could be crazy like we did and have somebody else pick and place it for you, which means then you have to order all the parts and get them shipped to the place that's doing the pick and place for you. They then pick and place everything for you, and then they send it back, and you really, really hope that the board works, because if it doesn't, you're going to have to go through that whole process again. So we actually had 3 runs of the badge this year. Yeah, three pre-runs of the badge this year to make sure that we didn't run into a spot where that first display board, by the way, year 4, when we put the display board on basically an Adreno chip, we had the board, there was an error on the board in one of the traces, so we literally had to sit there and cut 110 boards, cut the trace, and then put a bodge wire in place. It's awesome. You get stuff really cheap from China. You can order it from there. Twice so far this year. Was it twice or 3 times? It's twice, right? Twice we got caught by customs. One, because the badge, which I'll do a demo of here in a bit, has these cute speaker spacers, so we can actually have the lipos inside it underneath. The manufacturers, though, when he sent them to me, I spent $203 for all 1,000 pieces that we needed. They put $197 or $204 per piece rather than for all the pieces. So our government said, wow, that's a really small box to be worth like 200 grand. What are you doing with this thing? So it took many months of going back and forth with them, or not many weeks, not many months, going back and forth with them to finally realize, because they wouldn't even tell me what it was shipped. And I had like 7 things coming, so I didn't know which one they were talking about. Finally, I got a whole nice lady, and she said, they look like this, they're little plastic spacers. I was like, oh, I paid $204 for the whole thing. And they're like, oh, it's in the wrong space. And finally, we got that worked through. And then the last panic was we were shipping the batteries, and they wouldn't actually make the batteries until we paid for them, made the batteries, paid for them, shipped them. They were one of the last things that were going to show up, and they hit customs, and customs said, yeah, we're going to hold on to those up to 60 days for you. And this was about 3 weeks ago. So I was actually sitting next to Zero and watched his rather pale face even turn more pale as that happened. That was stressful. But within about a week, I think we got it worked through, and many panicked phone calls. That solved that problem as well, especially because we actually partnered with the Crypto Village and actually bought their batteries with ours, just so we could get a large enough to get the discount. Last year when we ordered parts, I was leaving on vacation and ordered them from AliExpress. So ordered them from AliExpress, and they canceled the order as I was getting on my cruise boat. So I had to call back to Zero and say, please, could you reorder these? Because I don't know why they canceled them. He ordered them. A week later, they canceled his order too. Now I get back and we're like 2.5 weeks away from the actual con, and we still don't have any parts yet. It appears that the first time you order through AliExpress, if you order more than $1,000, you actually have to prove your creditworthiness to them before they'll actually allow any purchases to go through. So, oh my God, China. That's all I'll say. You get all kinds of cool stuff from there, but man, it can be a pain to get it in the States. Oh, one more thing. So, yesterday, or Monday, we all didn't want the badges to come in and someone assemble it and not know if it powered on or not. So we're like, okay, well, we'll flash the badges. You know how long it takes to flash 1,000 badges by hand? About 9 hours. About 9 hours is what it takes. With 2 of us going the whole time. It was long. But I think next year we'll be looking at figuring out how to do that so we aren't literally moving the little plugs over and over again. So how about a demo? Yeah. All right. So first, there's actually a power switch this year. Assuming I actually turn it on. There we go. Can that be seen? That's the big disclaimer that this is alpha firmware and not ready yet. There, I made something to do with your LEDs this year. You happy? There you go. So we have the IR pairing like we had last year. We have the address book that once you paired, you can actually look at who you paired with. Then you can go and actually send them equivalent of a text message. We also have a simple 3D render running. No woo for that. Come on, guys. You have any idea how long it took to write a software renderer at my age? Come on. And then the funnest part, the actual dialer. It is. I actually got on YouTube and was counting how long it would take. It's like, okay, that's how long it should take. So, all right, Gator, I think you got the next one, right? Or you were Zero?
But wait, there's more. So we'll be presenting more information on the badge build at DefCon in the Hardware Hacking Village. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Zero.
And I just get to say thank you. Thanks everybody for supporting us, for coming to this talk. We can't teach you everything about badge building in 1 hour. We tried. Maybe it takes 2 hours. We want to thank everyone who's here, everybody who's helped us with stuff in the back end, every one of our agents who's been out there on Discord for weeks and weeks working with us. Thanks everybody for all of it, and for supporting us. And this badge, like I said, it's integral to our organization. It funds us. It is exciting, and come see us at DefCon. Thank you.
And we targeted this for about 30 minutes, so we had plenty of time for questions at the end because we assumed there would be many. Hopefully we were right.
Now we're good. No questions here? Okay, great. Thanks, guys. See you next year.
Oh, I've got a question. Sure. You said the RAM is, obviously a big limiting factor. Is that just because there's only 30K available on that F3 chip, or is it a cost issue, or what was the...
There's only 30 available on that F3 chip.
That's all? Okay.
There is one other one that you can go up to 48. 48 would have actually been enough this year, because I could have at least done 8 bits of color on the renderer rather than 6. You need to get, if you have a 128 by 160 or 160 pixels and you want full color, and you look at 18 bits per, do the math. I can't do math right now. I had too many beers. So, other questions? You had one right there.
You mentioned that the overarching MMO was slightly based off of the Daniel Suarez books. So, since this is the 25th anniversary, are there going to be any autonomous motorcycles in the game this year?
Can we get bets?
Yeah, we actually voted on that. It was a close vote. I won't tell you how it turned out.
Just out of curiosity, question for you guys. How many DarkNet agents are in the room? Can I get a show of hands?
Nice.
All right. Thanks, guys, for coming out.
Snubs. Ooh, hello. How you doing?
My question is because I'm not super familiar with writing code, but I'm pretty familiar with doing the electronics part, the hardware hacking. Do you have any recommendations, people I could talk to, books that I could read to get me more familiar with writing the programming for badges in case I wanted to build my own?
So the fun part about that is we actually have something in the works to where we're creating a site that you're able to reference, and that there's not only just references for that, but there's references for a lot of the rest of the DC DarkNet as well. So check out holon.network, and more on that will be coming in the future. And
Holon, HOLON.
.network.
And we also, our badge code is open sourced. Years before, you can see the source code and see how that works. And then for this year, we'll open source it after the conference.
One more thing there too. It is not easy, especially as somebody that hasn't done like the hardware stuff. I did a little bit with Crux this year, and I have Crux to teach, so that helps. But the software side of things, when someone says I²C and you're like, okay, what does that mean? And the best examples and the best learning tools I've found so far is actually on SparkFun. I literally, usually when I'm doing this stuff, I have it sitting up and I'll read through what I²C is again, refresh my memory, then go back and do it, even if there's APIs to work from. Cool part about the STM is there is a hardware abstraction library. So you can write the code once, and as long as you pound define out your pins right, you can move between their MCUs without changing a bunch of code. So that does help. I think we had one in the back. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So, as someone who is familiar with software and websites and stuff like that, what's some of the challenges you face in the software with regards to where the hardware doesn't behave as it promised, or it
Crux
doesn't?
tells me that never happens. It tells me that all the time.
Or there's variance between this allegedly same component, and can you give me some ideas on how you handled it?
You mean like this button versus this one here that are right next to each other, but somehow this one you have to push on harder on? Yes. I spent many hours literally sitting there for that, literally touching the buttons and having a stream of readouts so I could see how much the capacitance was dropping and how fast it was dropping off, to the point where I actually skipped over the HAL code and was just reading it directly off the capacitors, just so I could see how fast it was dropping, going, okay, maybe they have a bug in their library, and that's why I'm not picking up the change enough. Sometimes it's just what you have to do. The other thing about programming at MCU level, I mean, a lot of, and I probably sound like an old man here, but I mean, a lot of the new languages that get taught, I mean, you don't get taught what a section is, how to read a map file. I mean, all that stuff is still in play. So, I mean, it's like going back to the late 80s and still reading map files when you compile something and figuring out where it was at. When I run out of space, there's nothing to tell me what ran out of space other than to literally go through the map file, looking at the BSS section going, okay, for some reason when this thing got added to the executable, I went up by 2K of space. Why did that happen? Go look for the structure, find the structure, go pack the structure tighter, do the same, and I spent hours doing just that.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Last year, I thought that they had a sign up that said that you had to pre-order to get the badge. Is that standard that you have to buy it ahead of time, or do you have badges available?
No, we don't do ahead of time. The only thing we do is anybody that completes the case file that we put up, which is 3.5 times more than we've had to complete last year, which is kind of awesome.
What was the number?
What's that?
What was the number?
This year we're at 300.
Almost 300.
Yeah. We just have badges, and we'll post when the badges are gone. Will be available.
So the people who create or who are able to go through that entire process get first access to it. Is what happens.
That was another key learning. There was a year where we didn't do that, and we actually had people that were very into the contest that then couldn't complete it because they couldn't get a badge because someone else just. So we're trying to make sure that the people that play get first dibs on it and actually have reserve badges. The people that finished. So we don't talk about how many we actually bring because there was incident a couple of years ago. So when we run out, we run out.
More than last year, though.
Yeah, much more than last year because, like I said, $32,000 out in front, and I put out a good chunk of that myself.
So I'm a huge fan of the Suarez books, but I think Sobal might have killed me. I'm a terrible agent, and so I'm looking for assistance. And this is a selfish ask for help. So I don't know how to.
Good room to do it in.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking right now. That's why I'm doing it. So anyway, afterwards, anyone who wants to help me, I would appreciate it.
The DarkNet table is always there, man.
And Discord, we have a lot of people on Discord all the
Join our
time.
Discord.
Spoilers channel.
Spoilers channel on Discord.
Yep.
So it's not just spoils. The cool part about it's not just spoilers. People are not supposed to be posting answers. They're supposed to be encouraging other people to move forward and being able to say, here's how or the right path that I went to go solve it, but not giving the answers.
Cool.
Another question.
I got to. What's that? You'll see it in all our social media channels and in Discord announcement channel.
Yep.
I got to ask one quick question. How many in the room, this is going to date me, how many in the room have actually played a MUD before?
Okay, good amount. We got this.
That's all I'm going to say. Okay, good.
Yeah, I got a question. I think it's what the young lady just asked there. When and in case it's not out there already, when and where are they going to be on sale?
We will post both in our Discord channel, on our Twitter, and then all the operatives, which are the staff, will be posting on their own personal Twitters as well to make sure everybody get the word out.
We'll do it on Reddit as well. So anytime that we do it on one, we're doing it across all of the social medias, not just
Another
one.
interesting part of growing up, sorry, Gator, is growing to a team of 20. We actually now have like a sign-off thing before something goes out, so we don't get one group like announcing one thing and someone else because we did that last year and then everybody got mad at us because 2 different pieces of information were out. It's interesting trying to herd a bunch of volunteers.
Hey, what's up? So as somebody who's helped people solder the DarkNet badge for the last 4 years, really glad that we have less surface mount stuff. But
Crux, did you hear that? Yeah. Crux, did you hear that? Okay, good.
well, last year with the reflow oven, that was super cool. But how did you guys do the balance between having that sharp look of a surface mount board with kind of making it easier this year?
We cheated. We had it pick and placed for us. That's how we did it. Any other questions?
We got one in the back
there. And one up here.
Go back first.
Back way. Thank you.
I'm just curious about 2 things. So the first thing is the cost breakdown. Are you going to share a bit about the cost breakdown? And secondly, what was the timeline like for the creation of the badges?
So I guess that's another lesson that we learned last year. Last year we had the last prototype of the badge made, I think, July 10th, and then had to order the official ones, had to pay extra to get them built and made on time, and they got shipped to Crux's house, I believe, 2 days before the con started. There was many nervousness at that point. This year we had all the components, save the actual PCBs and the batteries by the end of June, and the batteries with the last minute customs thing didn't help nerves. And then the PCBs, I think we had by July 11th, July 12th, somewhere in there. Yeah.
We also started the development cycle way early. We started pretty much right after the con last year, rather than waiting till almost March when we had the whole A/B. We're going to go the new badge design, old badge design. We started really early, proved it out very early, and then just kept on iterating on components and prototypes.
From a management standpoint, I'm managing a group of 20 volunteers, breaking them down into the slide where we had all the different groups. So one group took story, another group took badges, another group took software, breaking that in and putting leads in at each one and having leads come back to a meeting initially every other week for an hour just to go over, hey, what's the timeline for your group? When's this going, what? And not that we dictated anything, but you guys tell us what you're going to do, and then we're just going to track to it. That helped a ton. And as we get bigger, we're going to have to keep coming up with better ways of managing a group that large. There you go.
You mentioned the trade-off between
it sounds like there's a little bit of an arms race between the hardware and the software and figuring out what the right components are to.
There's no argument ever.
And then you get to a certain stage where you have to comment out some code. Can you talk a little bit about, I imagine some of it's a cost decision about whether you're going to go for 32 RAM versus 64. What do you have in terms of performance?
So this year it was really driven around, oh my God, we better not have that many solder joints ever again, or A, Bunny will kill us, who runs the hardware hacking village, and we don't want that because we like Bunny. I think Crooks was up one night and said, hey, what about if we just use touch buttons? And that kind of drove us to, hey, we need a processor that actually has a sampling capacitor built into it. So that kind of started limiting it. And then then I think I told him that I'd kill him if he changed the processor architecture again, because going from an Atmel chip to an M4 was painful enough. I didn't think I wanted to do that again. So that's kind of how we got there. I don't think it was so much around cost, because actually the ST chips are pretty cheap to begin with. They're roughly $2 a piece. So, other questions?
We got one in the back.
Hi. So I had a question, but first I wanted to say I've had a lot of exposure to kits going all the way back to like Heathkit and Greymark and stuff like that. Last year's DarkNet badge was one of the funnest kits I've ever made. Period. So thank you.
Cool. Awesome.
Second, you talked a couple times about RAM constraints. Is there a way to augment that to make it easier on you? And second, could you add external RAM or something? And second, do you leave it at what it is as kind of a personal challenge, or what?
I have to admit there's probably a little bit of that, yes. I didn't have to add the 3D renderer, but I did. And considering the room wasn't all that impressed, maybe I shouldn't have. It was just a spinning cube. I got to get something else.
We can just comment it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think some of it's that, but the RAM is harder to come by. I mean, we could add external RAM, but it's going to be really slow. I can add extra flash. Flash is a little bit easier to work with. The flash constraints are usually gotten around by just realizing if you usually put static const in front of whatever you're doing, that the compilers will usually recognize that and immediately write it to flash. And yes, the way all the ARM processors are is that's just mapped directly into memory for you. Like the ST, it maps it in at hex 8 million, I believe, is where it gets mapped in at. So you can address it like you address any other piece of memory. Hopefully that answers your question.
So for each of you, if you could go back and give one piece of advice to yourself, back a year, back 2 years related to this, whether it's the software for the badge, the hardware for the badge, storyline, whatever, and building out what the awesomeness that DarkNet is today, what would it be for each of you?
Do you want to start with that?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So plan. Every year we go through and we have these grand schemes, and making sure that you push as much as you possibly can forward. You also have to have yourself a timeline. If you don't set any goal by saying, hey, I should be able to accomplish this in this amount of time, then move on to the next project, you will find yourself on Wednesday needing to enter a whole bunch of quests, and as soon as we're done with the talk, being able to finish anything, like, I'm just going to pass, go ahead, Zero. For sure for me, it would be to remind myself that we should only change one major thing at a time. Last year, we took a completely new software infrastructure, a completely new user interface, a completely new badge. I'm sure it was like a completely new everything. And we did it all in the same year, and it was difficult. I would remind myself that that's not a good idea.
I'd say we did do that last year, and it was incredibly painful. I think you guys probably all seen us scurrying around trying to write the back-end code even while the conference was going on last year. For me, I mean, there's a sarcastic side of me that says, never have told Smitty I'd take over the firmware. So there's a part of me that says that, but I think I would go back and say, hey, don't just look at it as software. You have to learn the hardware side too. Because the first couple of years I was like, Crux has got the hardware, it's all good. It was only till last year and this year where I actually started digging in. I could actually read the Eagle files. It solved a lot of problems. And just starting, I'd say even just now after 2 years of doing it, finally the terms are not like, oh God, I got to go look that up again. It takes a long time because there's a lot of them. Especially with somebody that, I mean, I'm classically trained as a chemist and then became a software engineer. Never touched hardware before, so it was a long road. Any other questions? Crux, you want to add to that?
What would you do different?
Where are you?
Good call.
Start earlier.
Sorry, were you addressing?
Yep, go ahead.
So questions about battery. Do you guys shoot for like a specific amount of runtime, or is it just like as big a battery as you can cram on the board, or how do you figure out what size battery?
Well, Crux figured out what size battery, but we do try to target so that it's with the rechargeable one. It was a little bit easier because we figured that we only had to make it through a day, and then everybody could charge it at night. When we had the 3 batteries, we did try to make sure that the 3 batteries would actually make it all the way through the con. And I'll admit that I only just figured out how to do that about 3 weeks ago. So, and where I like literally hooked up the badge and had the amp meter running going, oh, that's why the battery goes down so much when I turn on all the LEDs. Sweet. So, anything you want to add to that, Crux?
A lot of it's swag. That should be good. A lot of it's swag. It's like, that should be good. But, yeah.
There is actually a way to measure it, though, and I've figured out how, so it's good. You need the badge together first, though, which is the hard part. All right. Any other questions?
Yep.
Have you guys started next year's?
Oh, God, no. I gotta make it to Sunday first, dude. But knowing this group, by Monday, there'll be all this chatter of like, we could do this, and I'm like, I just want to sleep.
We have a meeting on Tuesday.
That's true, we do. Okay.
How hard was it for you to source all the stuff that you need to make the badges from China? I mean, did you just order online blindly, or did you actually fly out there and?
Oh God, no! We didn't fly out there. I mean, I'll stress again that this is all a group of volunteers. It is an LLC, but we run it like a nonprofit. In fact, every year so far, we've actually been in the red, not in the black. This group of people just love doing this. And quite honestly, it's one of my funnest times of the year because I get to be with these guys. Inside of Eagle, you can actually just say generate bomb. So once you have all your pieces laid out, you can generate the bomb. And then Crux does some Voodoo Black Magic spreadsheet work. And then we just order off the Voodoo Black Magic spreadsheet work. You'll have to talk to Crux about how many chickens he has to sacrifice to create that spreadsheet. Many chickens.
Looks like we got one more.
Got one here too.
Awesome.
They're just making sure they're on a complete opposite side of the room to keep you bouncing back and forth as much as possible.
Running.
That's what we do.
So I have to second this individual's comment. This has been absolutely funnest, most addicting aspect of the event for myself. But I have noticed that the challenges have progressively gotten harder from when the game first has started. Okay, thank you very much. I've always been an advocate for people to join this. Do you have a targeted audience that you'd like to see start to play this? Because I felt it was very good for me to learn in the beginning. It was easier, but it's getting harder to hang in there. So do you have a particular audience that you're looking? Because I thought it was great because it touched every aspect of the con. And I don't want you guys to lose that.
Sure. So that's a tricky problem in general. For the first few years, the content was pretty introductory and pretty repetitive for that reason. And so as we started to branch out and get more people, the flip side of that comment is, that's just the tour quest again, the same one that we had all those other years. So we constantly struggle to hit the balance between introductory content, branching into new areas, and keeping the old content, and then giving more advanced stuff to make it a more and more challenging contest year after year. We welcome, feedback. Anybody who wants to should jump into Discord and help us with that, because it's not a solved problem by any stretch. And one of the things that we've worked really hard to do year after year is try to come up with a system where we can keep all of the content up year round, and we're this
close. And with that,
I mean, as long as you keep up with primes, you'll get most of Zero's stuff. But you need to make sure he understands that primes suck in general, and that relative primes are much better. There's a hint, by the way.
and along with that is that ultimately our goal is to be able to still keep some beginner stuff so people can be able to get their foot in the door, and then they're able to have a next level. So a noob, a advanced, and then a, oh my god, what did they do this year? So we're getting into the swing of things, trying to create quests that have that in mind.
I think we had one more over here somewhere, or is that it right here?
One more right here. Awesome. Thank you. You're
Right
awesome.
there. I just.
Given your chemistry background, you might want to clarify bomb to the audience.
Bill of material. But that's a good point. You know, if you do take Ni3 and you put you make really cool stuff with Ni3 though.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Can you give us an Easter egg for the badge for this year?
Oh, then. Oh, so the dialer, there might be phone numbers you can enter in the dialer and get stuff. Maybe. There you go. There's a particular song back in the 80s that. Yeah, it probably was. I didn't expect everybody in the room to get it like that. Y'all are old as me. Damn.
So for the content that's on the badge, is it all stored in source?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The content that's on the badge, is that all stored in source? Because what I was thinking is if you offload the content onto some slow storage like an SD card, it may save up some room for RAM to be able to work.
Yeah, so this year's badge, I guess I didn't point this out, but this year's badge does have an SD card reader. But that code's commented out too because I couldn't fit the SD card code.
Help us fork it.
And for financial reasons, couldn't give everybody an SD card along with it. So that was all right. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much, everybody.